I'm back to talk about the emotional aspects of premenopause again. Today we're talking about depression in premenopause and some of the ways to address it naturally with food and supplementation. Now, all of us who go through puberty have some kind of symptoms with hormone flux that we identified. Some of us have just physical symptoms and others of us have more emotional symptoms. And based on what you experienced during puberty, you may experience the same thing in premenopause when you're in your early 40s or mid to late 40s sometime. And some of us have more anxiety in the emotional aspect, or some of us can have depression. Today I'm going to be talking about serotonin and the way that it addresses depression. When you think about all of the drugs that are prescribed for depression these days, they are called SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and they're addressing that serotonin for a very good reason. Serotonin can really help us when we're down in the dumps in our mood and can lift the mood remarkably. The thing about SSRIs is that they work less and less over time, so you need more and more of them. And detoxing off of them or taking them out of your life can be really dangerous because they can cause a lot of emotional instability when you go off of them. So it's kind of scary to ever go off of them. There's a lot of literature that records some of the consequences of taking yourself off, even weaning yourself off slowly off of SSRIs. So, as a nutritionist, I definitely would recommend to my clients to try the natural approach before ever going into the realm of pharmaceuticals in this area. Of course, there are some who need emergency treatment because their emotions are so severe. And of course, if your doctor is recommending an SSRI under those circumstances, you should be very wise to follow their recommendation. But if you're just having slight mood swings and mood instability as a result of hormone flux, then I think you can usually manage these naturally with supplementation and diet. So today we're talking just about serotonin and its precursors. Its main precursor is tryptophan, and you might have heard about this because it is high in turkey meat, and we talk about tryptophan sometimes at Thanksgiving when people eat a lot of turkey, and sometimes they can get a little tired because tryptophan is something that kind of slows you down and makes you a little tired. But more than that, tryptophan, if it gets into the brain, which is a little tricky, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is a really good mood enhancer because it causes serotonin to start working and start reproducing in your system. And serotonin is a great mood enhancer and can really level out your lower moods. So the way that tryptophan works best, and it comes mainly through protein, there's theories about how we ended up getting less tryptophan into our diets and why we have such an epidemic of depression these days. One theory is that we get a lot less natural meat or wild meat in our diet. So most animals that provide muscle meat for food to us as humans have a history of eating green things. Even fish eat green things most of all. And certainly deer and elk, if you follow them around, they eat leaves and grass most of all. Sometimes some berries, but mostly leaves and grass. And the food that we eat now, the meat that we eat now, is factory farmed for the most part, and those animals just eat greens. They don't get any green food. And so the tryptophan in them is severely depleted. So one really good way to get good quality tryptophan is to start eating more wild fish and wild meat, and especially grass-fed poultry and eggs. You can get a little bit of tryptophan from fermented soy or dairy products, but the best way to get it is in meat and eggs, and especially in poultry, which is hard to find grass-fed poultry, and it is more expensive. The other thing is that tryptophan really needs to have a carbohydrate source with it in the diet, eaten at the same time in order for insulin to kick in and bring it across the blood-brain barrier. So it's a little bit tricky, but if you have regular sources of grass-fed poultry or eggs or wild meat or fish, and you eat them with potatoes or carrots or even broccoli or cauliflower in a regular kind of traditional meal, Western kind of meal. And certainly rice if you're eating a traditional Eastern kind of meal, then you will get enough tryptophan in your diet naturally. Now, if your tryptophan and serotonin levels have been super depleted, then you might want to supplement for a little while you're ramping up your diet and your new dietary habits. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But some of the foods that you can eat are those wild meats, those fermented soy and dairy, and grass-fed poultry and eggs. Two other really huge habits that can increase serotonin naturally and really easily is increasing moderate exercise and getting natural light exposure. So going out in the morning and getting yourself into the sun or even into the bright cloudy area. Sun rays can come through clouds even though we don't feel their warmth. But getting exposure to that light coming from the sun, whether it's direct or indirect, is really important for serotonin production. If you live and work inside, and if you're not an active person that goes out and hikes and bikes and swims outside, then you're not getting a lot of natural light. And it's so easy to just spend an hour outside and to make that a part of your daily routine. It doesn't cost anything except for time, and it's a great mood booster. And of course, good sleep is only going to benefit you in the mood department as well. Making sure that your exercise is not extreme, so not going too crazy on the cardio, is also a really good way to make sure moderate exercise is increasing your serotonin levels. Now, the way to supplement for serotonin is pretty easy and direct, straightforward. It is using a supplement called 5-hydroxytryptophan. So it's basically tryptophan in supplement form. I always say supplements aren't as good as food, but supplements are quicker than food when you're in a bind. So if you need to supplement, 5-HTP is what the label will say for 5-hydroxytryptophan. And I'll leave my favorite label, my favorite brand of that, in a link below that will lead to my discounted dispensary. You can always supplement, but you want to make sure and supplement for seasons, not continually for the rest of your life. You want to take yourself off of that 5-HTP for periods of time just to see if your hormones have balanced themselves out naturally. And I think you will find that they will find a good balance on their own, so you won't become dependent on taking that supplement. Now, of course, there is always the option of supplementing with progesterone itself. And that will be a video that I will make in the future. All of these symptoms that I'm going to be talking about in this series, emotional symptoms are just one of them. But all of these symptoms can be solved by taking a natural hormone supplement of progesterone. But progesterone, like estrogen, is tricky, and you need to do that. If you're wise, you'll do it under the advice of a doctor and the supervision of a doctor, and you'll do regular testing. Hormone testing is also tricky, and sometimes you'll find that hormone symptom questionnaires will tell you a little bit better story about the state of your hormones than an actual test, even if it's a saliva or urine test, which are the best of the hormone tests. They can't always present a full picture the way that a hormone symptom questionnaire, like the symptoms that I listed in the very first video in this series on premenopause that I made, does. So go back through those symptoms, see if you still have them. If you do, then you may want to supplement with progesterone in a natural form. I always recommend the bioidentical form of progesterone, not the synthetic form of progestins that a medical doctor might want to prescribe. And hopefully they won't want to prescribe it because that is way more potent than most of us need. So stay tuned for future videos on how to address other symptoms besides these emotional symptoms of anxiety and depression that are so common. And at the very end of this series, I'll talk about the last resort of supplementing with some natural bioidentical progesterone, which I'm hoping you can avoid because it's costly to go back and see doctors a lot and measure your hormones and try to guess and figure out what dose is right for you. And some of us are just really sensitive to hormone supplementation. So I'm hoping that we can avoid getting you supplementing on progesterone by doing all these natural dietary and lifestyle approaches. But, of course, it doesn't work for everyone, and sometimes we need a little bit of natural hormone supplementation to go with all of our diet and lifestyle efforts. So stay tuned for those videos, and we'll be talking more about other symptoms besides anxiety and depression in my next video. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.